Welcome, everybody. Looks like we're good to go. My name is Jaleesa Johnston. I work as Programs Lead in the Learning and Community Partnerships Department at the Portland Art Museum. And for my verbal description, I am a Black woman. I'm wearing red lipstick. I have black rimmed glasses. I have curly black hair that's about shoulder length. I'm wearing a black plaid shirt. I have silver hoop earrings on and a silver necklace on, and I'm sitting in a gray room, and then right behind me is a door, a white door. And so that is where I'm at. I'm coming to you from to be honest, my in-laws' house, because that's where the good internet is, because I'll be playing some videos for you today. And with that, I also would like to begin and open our program with a land acknowledgement. While many of you may be joining from elsewhere around the country or even globe, I want to begin our time together by recognizing and honoring the Indigenous peoples of this region on whose ancestral lands the Portland Art Museum now stands. These include the Willamette Tumwater, Clackamas, Cathlamet, Motlala, Multnomah, and Watlala Chinook peoples, and the Tualatin Kalapoya, who today are a part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and many other Native communities who made their homes along the Columbia River. We also want to recognize that Portland today is a community of many diverse Native peoples who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. And during today's program, if at any point you have any questions, which the focus is on the Q&A for today's program, please be sure to enter them into the Q&A box on Zoom. And then if you're watching us on Facebook Live, just enter them into the chat, and we have a colleague who's feeding them over to us here on Zoom. And I would also like to thank our members and supporters for making this program possible for you today. And finally, now I can actually introduce the program and introduce our speaker today. I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Julia Dolan, the Minor White Curator of Photography, to talk a little bit about the Ansel Adams in Our Time exhibition currently on view at the museum. Julia Dolan has curated, co-curated, or hosted over 40 photography exhibitions since joining the Portland Art Museum in 2010. She also oversees research of and acquisitions for the permanent collection, which currently holds more than 10,000 photographs. She is a member of the museum's equity team and was a co-founder of the Focus Group, a North American network of emerging photography curators, historians, and nonprofit professionals. And with that, I would like to thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Jaleesa, so much. Hi, everybody. I am beaming to you from about a mile away from the museum, sort of similarly to Jaleesa, the Wi-Fi at the museum from my office space is not always reliable. So they're working on it. So it's a little more reliable at home. So I'm at home at the moment. My visual description, I am a white woman and I have long, straight, reddish brown hair. Today, I'm wearing a green top with buttons at the neck, and I'm seated at my dining room table, which what you see from my camera viewpoint is my kitchen. My kitchen is behind me, and it's mostly gray and dark brown tones, and hopefully not too many dirty dishes, but we're all showing everyone who we really are these days, right? So, which actually I appreciate a lot. We're all human beings and we've all been through something really difficult together. So I think it's important to just show up where we are and who we are, right? Yeah. So I'm super happy to be with you today. Thank you so much, Jaleesa, and thank you, Becky, also from the Learning Department for keeping this program going, because I know it's really important to a lot of folks and means a lot in the community. And so I'm so happy we're able to do it via Zoom at this point, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll all be back together again. So this is going to be a bit of a different art and conversation. Normally, the person you are seeing or watching or listening to talks most of the time. we really weren't sure how things were going to go with the Ansel Adams in Our Time exhibition. It was supposed to open last October, then it was supposed to open January 30th. And of course, because of government regulations, we just couldn't do that. We weren't allowed for the most part to even be open. So what we did is we made some videos. So I did install the exhibition in January. We put it on the walls, got everything ready, and then we turned off the lights and we locked the doors and we waited until we could finally be open to the public again. But we didn't know when that was coming. And then we didn't know how many people would be allowed by law, by the government, to see the works at any given time. And the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, where the exhibition or most of the exhibition comes from, was a great partner and worked with us to keep it on the walls as long as possible, no one knowing when we could open again. But we just weren't sure how things might go. So we decided to make a couple of videos. And that way, folks who either would have to wait to see the exhibition or for whatever reason will not come to the museum to see the space and to see the works in person can actually experience the exhibition through this video. It was quite a learning process for me. It is one thing to give a tour within galleries when you have people in front of you, because I work off of the people who are in front of me. If they have questions, if they have facial expressions, if they're looking at something that maybe I haven't mentioned yet, and I can kind of move the conversation around those cues that happen in the room. But because of where we were during the pandemic, I had to stand completely alone in front of an iPhone on a tripod because I couldn't have my mask off unless I was alone. So John Richardson, who is someone who, he's one of our digital media experts, he would set up the camera and he'd run to another gallery. I would take off my mask. He would start his iPhone from his iWatch, his Apple Watch. And then I would talk to this little box on a tripod. So they don't teach you that in graduate school. So I had to learn a lot, like we've all had to learn a lot of things lately, which is great. I'm okay with it. But you may feel a little bit of my anxiety and awkwardness in this, but let's just embrace it. We all have points and times when we're unsure of what we're doing, but we go for it anyway. So what I'll be doing in the second video is I'll be guiding you through the spaces of the exhibition with overviews for each space. And so whether you've seen the exhibition already in person, or you're coming to see the exhibition later, or if for whatever reason that's not an option for you, at least the video gives you an idea of what it's like in the spaces and will reinforce some of the underpinnings of the exhibition. As I mentioned, this exhibition came to us from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston. They have an exceptional collection of photography, and their Ansel Adams collection is amazing. Many of the works in the exhibition that are not by Ansel Adams, that are contemporary works, are also part of Boston's collection. So the first video that you will see is a short video by Karen Haas, Haas. And Karen is my colleague at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston who put this exhibition together. She curated it, but she was such a great partner. She also said to me, Portland is its own city. It has its own communities. If you think there are themes that you'd like to revisit or look at a little bit more than I have in my version of the exhibition, please do add work. So I added, I think, about 8 or 10 photographs, I'm forgetting now, to give a little more information. And I'll point out some of those in the video. So the first video that you're going to see is Karen giving us a kind of overview welcome. And then the next one that you will see is me in the gallery spaces as they are now, guiding the iPhone through the spaces. And then after that, I'll be back live. Hold on to your questions. Bring them to us at the end, and I'll do my best to answer them. I may not know the answers to all of them, but I'll do my best. And as a reminder, you do have through August 1st to see the exhibition in person, and our restrictions are still in place, but they are much easier on us, and we can allow in a couple hundred people an hour at this point. So chances are pretty good if you look online to reserve tickets, or even if you walk up now, we are taking some walk up folks to get tickets. It most likely won't be a problem unless it's a super busy hour. So we're looking forward to, if you'd like, for you to come see it in person. Okay, so I think that's my introduction, and I'm gonna hand it back to Jaleesa, who's gonna set up Karen Haas's video, and then we'll hop to mine, and we'll see you on the other side.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, as questions come up, please enter them in the Q&A box if you're on Zoom. And then if you're on Facebook Live, just enter them into the chat. I'll be sharing my screen, playing the videos for you. Just a reminder, I am at my in-laws' house, so if you hear any background noise, I do apologize in advance. Please disregard. Okay, let's get going.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I so wish we could be there in person and celebrating together in the Portland Art Museum's beautiful galleries. The one silver lining in these challenging times is that we're at least able to gather virtually this evening from some very far-flung places. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to all of the incredible donors, sponsors, lenders, artists, and colleagues who made this exhibition possible. It truly takes a village. And very special thanks go to the management, registration, and preparation departments at the Portland Art Museum for really going above and beyond what was required to make this all happen. And especially to Julia Dolan, who so beautifully managed the challenges of curating an exhibition remotely. With this exhibition, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston celebrated the acquisition of more than 450 Ansel Adams photographs from the Lane collection. Originally acquired directly from the artist by Boston area collectors, the late William H. and Sandra Lane. During the 1960s and 70s, this remarkable gift makes the Museum of Fine Arts Boston one of the major holdings of this truly pivotal figure in our field. Ansel Adams' photographs of the American West comprise really what is an iconic visual legacy. His was a vision that was greatly influenced by the 19th century survey and expedition photographers who came before him. Figures like Carlton Watkins, Edward Muybridge, and Timothy O'Sullivan, among others. But that legacy is also something that contemporary artists continue to reckon with today. For my generation, at least, many of us having grown up surrounded by Sierra Club posters, calendars, and publications, Ansel Adams is really a larger-than-life figure. So when the idea of organizing an Ansel Adams exhibition was first broached at the MFA, I have to admit my initial reaction was, what can I possibly say that is new about such a well-known and widely admired figure? It was a daunting assignment for a curator of photographs, but one that really turned into a learning experience and really a fascinating process, especially now seeing it so beautifully installed in Portland. For many of us, when we close our eyes and try to conjure up the spectacle of the national parks and wilderness spaces of the West, places that some of us will never see in person, it's often an Ansel Adams photograph that comes to mind in all of its glorious tones of black, white, and gray. That idea has always stayed with me, and it's something that I've thought a lot about while working on this exhibition. So my goal in doing this show was to offer a new perspective on Ansel Adams by placing his work into a broader context and bringing the conversation about him forward in time. To recognize that he did not develop his distinctive style in isolation, and that his deep connection to the natural environment still speaks to us in powerful ways today. Throughout the exhibition, which traces Adams's career roughly chronologically, his photographs are juxtaposed with works by more than 25 contemporary artists who are drawn to some of the same places and are tackling some of the same issues affecting the environment, now some 75 years later. But little did I know when I first considered this exhibition that it would resonate so powerfully or feel quite so topical for audiences today, or that Adams's advocacy for the land would take on the increasing urgency that it has for so many of us. But perhaps it will be the work of contemporary artists, like those in the exhibition, that further opens our eyes to the connection between human behavior and climate change, and helps lead us to a better understanding of the natural landscape and our very fragile place within it. That's certainly my hope. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Dolan, the Minor White Curator of Photography at the Portland Art Museum, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming you at long last to Ansel Adams in our time. We are so excited to have this exhibition here, and we're about to open it to the public. And before we do, I want to say thank you so much to our many donors and supporters of the museum who made this exhibition possible. We had to postpone it and delay it, and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston worked with us to make sure that we could have this incredible photography exhibition up on view for everyone. And we're just so grateful for all of the support we received. So today is Monday, which means that the museum is currently closed to the public, and I am alone, so my mask is off, which makes it easier for me to speak and hopefully for you to hear me. So why don't we head into the exhibition galleries for an exhibition overview and some highlights. One of the first things you may notice when you walk into the gallery space is that the lights are dimmer throughout the exhibition. That's for a very distinct reason. Photographs are pretty fragile and they respond to light over time. And the more light they receive, oftentimes it can degrade the work. So you may want to give yourself a little bit of time if you are coming to the physical space of the exhibition to allow your eyes to adjust to the lighting. We do have, as soon as you come into the very first gallery of Ansel Adams in our time, amazing examples of just exactly why we keep the lights dim. Because we have photographs from the 1860s here, all the way into the 21st century. Karen Haas, the Lane Senior Curator of Photographs at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, is the curator of this exhibition. And what I love about this very first, very kind of simple, not too many photographs within it gallery is that she lays out the premise of the exhibition for us right away. One of the very first photographs anyone who enters sees is this amazing image by Ansel Adams that probably looks familiar to you if you know Ansel's work at all. One of his earlier works from Yosemite, a place that he photographed in extensively throughout his life. And so we are immediately introduced to Ansel Adams and his work, perhaps in a way that we're already familiar with him. But then Karen also offers us images of Yosemite Valley by folks like Carlton Watkins, who were in the space of this incredible national park, photographing as early as the 1850s and the 1860s. So we get a viewpoint from an earlier photographic artist who had his own take on this incredible landscape that we get to encounter here in the Western United States. Moving forward into the 21st century, we have works by the duo Mark Klett and Byron Wolfe, who take a look at Ansel Adams and Carlton Watkins and then combine their work and demonstrate to us how these artists were working, were creating compositions, and were isolating aspects of Yosemite Valley to make an artistic photograph, to make a photograph that sings to us in many ways as viewers. And what Mark Klett and Byron Wolfe do is they provide to us, and you'll see on the wall over here, an amazing panorama that inserts copies of the original images from the 19th and 20th centuries layered onto their own photograph of that same space. And what I find so fantastic about these images is the reality of them. And that if we are to go to Yosemite Valley today, we have to do our own cropping within our brain to get an Ansel Adams photograph right there, or to get a Carlton Watkins photograph and see it the way that they saw it at the time. Klett and Wolf add the tourists back in and add the full panorama in, so we get a sense of how photographic arts work. What is also super important about this part of the exhibition is it underscores the idea of Ansel Adams in our time. This exhibition celebrates the incredible vision of Ansel Adams, but it also indicates to us that there is such a wide range of landscape photography continuing today. People photograph all the time in Yosemite, places that Ansel Adams made famous. And some of us might feel like, I can't photograph in these places because everything has already been said about them through Ansel Adams' photographs. And that's not true. Artists are expressing so many different things through the photography that they're making today. I'm just going to make a quick stop here for a moment in our Inkscape gallery. You'll notice that there isn't a whole lot going on. That's because we wanted to make sure that people keep moving into larger spaces during this time when we're trying to keep apart from one another. But what we did add is a mural. This is not an original, but this is a self-portrait by Ansel Adams, made in 1958 in Monument Valley, Utah. And I have a feeling we might see some selfies right in this space, but hopefully people will keep moving through. And then you'll be able to see the original photograph that Ansel made himself of this image downstairs, and we'll stop there later. The first expansive gallery that you will encounter is titled Marketing the View. And the images that you will see in this space range once again from the 19th into the 21st centuries to place Ansel Adams in conversation with those who came before him as well as those who came after. And you will see an incredible range of photographs made in the Yosemite Valley. Some of the highlights I'd like to point out to you are this case in the center that demonstrates a number of the ways that both artists making content to sell in Yosemite Valley in the 19th and early 20th centuries worked. There are stereo cards there to give you an idea of how people in the 19th century tried to make photographs look three-dimensional, so armchair tourists could feel like they were actually in the space of the Yosemite Valley. And one of the most wonderful groupings that I'm so excited is contained within this exhibition is this amazing set of prints. And it is called Parmillion Prints of the High Sierras, which was produced in 1927 by Ansel Adams. And these are some of the earliest photographs by Ansel that you will see really anywhere. And what's so fantastic about them is they give us a sense of what it is Ansel was striving for in the Yosemite Valley as he was learning how to become an artistic photographer and how to express his feelings about the American landscape. But they look quite different from the photographs that we are used to that Ansel was producing later in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. While they are beautiful, you can, I think, really see an individual working on his eye, working on composition, working on figuring out exactly what he wanted to say. It is very rare for people to see all 16 prints from this portfolio in one place at the same time. So I highly recommend that you spend a little bit of time with this 16 work set. There's an extra special photograph in this exhibition that I'd like to call your attention to that we added to the show for its Portland stop. And it's on loan to us from Michael and Jane Wilson. And it is this absolutely incredible photograph by Carlton Watkins taken in about 1878 in Yosemite Valley. And it is called Agassi Rock and the Yosemite Falls from Union Point. What is so amazing about this photograph is that it is one of only 2 known prints from the original negative. And the other print is in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. What is also incredibly important about this work is the fact that you probably will not be able to ever see this again. You cannot get to this point and see this view. For one thing, the road that originally went pretty close to this rock no longer exists. It was moved a few decades after Watkins made this photograph. And additionally, according to the internet, because I did some research, if you can get up to this point, the vegetation has grown and changed so much that having this viewpoint, making this photograph is today completely impossible. So please do take some time to look at this very special photograph while you're here. One more stop before we move on to the next gallery. In terms of the 21st century, we do have some examples in this gallery space. I highly recommend stopping by these two photographs, also made in Yosemite by Matthew Brandt. And they seem sepia, they seem very 19th century in the way that they present themselves to us. But I have a suggestion. Have a look at what the photographs are made from while you're here. It'll be quite a surprise. The next gallery in the exhibition is Becoming a Modernist. I love this gallery for two reasons. One is because it feels so incredibly serene because of the landscape work that is contained within it. And the other is because the photographs demonstrate the ways that Adams is growing and learning as a photographer, particularly in his home city of San Francisco in the 1930s. What you see over my left shoulder is a photograph by Ansel Adams of the Golden Gate before the bridge from 1932, which seems to be a more mature style for Adams. It's a little higher in contrast. It gives us the grand sweep of that beautiful bay. And it feels a little more like the Ansel Adams that we know from his mature period. Across from Adams's pre-bridge photograph is an incredible sweep of photographs, 4 in color by Richard Misrach of the bay as well as the bridge, and a fantastic sunburn photograph by Chris McCaw of the San Francisco Bay as well. I think that this wall is a fantastic example of the ways that photographers explore the landscape today and in our time. Something that you'll discover in this gallery as well is that although we often think of Ansel Adams as only looking at the grand vista of the American landscape, he made wonderful, wonderful details as well and made a lot of photographs within cities, including in San Francisco. So you will see some of that work here from the 1930s, including this rather difficult image of a cigar store Indian, as they were known at the time, racist depiction of a Native American person. We have paired this image with the absolutely fantastic photographs from our own collection by Zig Jackson, who is a Native American man who studied photography in San Francisco in the 1990s. And one of his series explores being Native American within the space of San Francisco. So you will see 2 photographs from that series next to Ansel Adams's representation. The next gallery that you'll encounter in the exhibition is in the American Southwest. Ansel Adams started traveling to the Southwest, to Arizona and to New Mexico in 1927. And as you can imagine, if you have been to this area of the country, the light is different there, and it is amazing light. And Ansel Adams, being a photographer, latched onto that light. He loved the landscape. He also loved the individuals he met there, both transplants as well as indigenous cultures. What you will see in this gallery are some of Ansel's most famous photographs, including Moonrise Hernandez from 1941 over my right shoulder, and some things that maybe you haven't seen before, including a number of photographs that he made in New Mexico of indigenous peoples and indigenous cultures. What I find so interesting about these photographs is the issue of inside and outside. While there is power that is held with the person who holds the camera and makes the photographs. There is also power that is held within communities. And Ansel was an outsider to these communities. While the photographs are wonderful, I think you can get a sense that he is still somebody who is considered a tourist or being outside of this range of communities within New Mexico. Will Wilson's photographs are included in the exhibition. Will Wilson is Diné. He was born in Arizona, and he now lives and works in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he works most often in portraiture. He is very interested in the ways that he is both American and Native American, and you can see that in this double portrait that is included in the exhibition. Additionally, we have a recording of Will Wilson that explains to us the ways in which he works and why he makes the portraits and the imagery that he does.
So some of the ideas that I was exploring in How the West is One, which is a kind of double self-portrait, it's really about kind of double consciousness. I think it's about existing kind of as both a Navajo man and a white man, you know. And there's also the kind of classical Western kind of mythology or trope that kind of, I think, underlies a lot of the way we understand what it means to be American. The American Indian, the American cowboy, like out in the frontier.
Welcome to Picturing the National Parks. According to Karen Haas, the curator of the exhibition from the MFA Boston, this is one of the most popular galleries within the exhibition, and people spent quite a long time looking at all the photographs in it. And there are many photographs.
When we think about our national parks, we think about them as being very American. It's an American landscape. Well, what does that mean? It certainly means different things to different people. And what does it mean if you weren't born here in the United States, but you live here now? Photographers like Bin Don and Abelardo Morel, who were not born in the United States, but now live here and work here, explore the spaces as people who come from elsewhere. So what does Americanness and American nature mean to them? And how do they photograph it? The American landscape has primarily been photographed by white men throughout the history of photography. We think about Carlton Watkins, Ansel Adams. What does it mean if you are a woman coming into this rugged space in the 20th or the 21st century? What do your images look like? Are they different because of your gender? What does it mean to be bucking tradition a little bit and going into spaces that were often celebrated only by American men? And Catherine Opie thinks a lot about this in her wonderful series of photographs that she's continuing today. Her exploration of national parks, her ideas about photographing in these spaces, what a photograph can look like when it's connected to memory. How do we read landscapes, even when they're blurry, and yet somehow we know what we're looking at and where perhaps we are.
One of my favorite moments in the exhibition is this salon-style wall behind me. Something that I find that is really important when I'm working with an exhibition is allowing the photographs to speak among themselves and meet one another. And you often don't know how one photograph will react to what's next to it until they're physically within the same space. I love these photographs together because they come from all different national parks. Some of them are details. They're likely photographs that you've never seen before that are by Adams. And I just love the way that they connected to one another as we worked with them within the gallery space. So I hope you enjoy the language that they're speaking among one another as much as I do. After the national parks, you will arrive at the other side of the mountains. Something that is important to keep in mind is that Ansel Adams didn't only photograph the celebratory aspects of nature in the United States. He also turned his camera to the issues, to the problems, to the misuses of the land. And he also went into spaces that were quite beautiful in their being utterly barren and difficult and perhaps even inhospitable. So in this section, there are some really magnificent photographic moments, but also some very difficult ones. An example of the ways that Ansel Adams would hold the glory and the pain of the American landscape at the same time is visible on this wall behind me. Just to my left is the amazing and probably familiar to you Winter Sunrise, Sierra Nevada from Lone Pine, California of 1944, one of Adams's most famous photographs. To its left are 4 photographs from a series that he made documenting the Manzanar internment camp, one of the incarceration facilities that held Japanese Americans during World War II, that is only about 15 miles away from the site where Adams made this incredibly famous image. So this is an example, side by side, of some of the work by Adams that is lifted up and celebrated, and then some examples of photographs that were pushed away and ignored for quite some time, but now people are beginning to return to as we study even more in depth this really difficult aspect of our national history. This tradition of documenting the misuses and problematic aspects of our Western landscape continue into the 21st century. Over my right shoulder, photographs by Stephen Torlentes of incarceration spaces within the American West. And then over my left shoulder, photographs by Trevor Paglin that are incredibly intense and also very, very subtle at the same time. And Paglin is someone who is very interested in photographing, again, within the space of the American West. However, he is photographing the systems, in this case, satellites, that are for the most part invisible to us. And they remind us that we are being watched at all times. I'm so grateful to Karen Haas, the originating curator of the exhibition, because she wanted us as an institution to add photographs that we believed would be important to our own community and to the stories we tell here at the museum. So in this nook, in the final gallery space of the exhibition, you will see photographs from our own Portland Art Museum collection that extends the story of Ansel Adams in our time just a little bit, and very specifically deals with issues of land and identity. Behind me are 4 photographs that are beloved at this institution and by viewers every time we hang them. These 4 photographs are The 4 Seasons by Wendy Redstar, who is Crow, who is from Montana, and who lives here in Portland. Redstar often uses humor to welcome her viewers into her artwork, to extend a hand and perhaps begin a conversation about very difficult topics, including racism and stereotyping. Over my left shoulder are photographs on either side of the self-portrait that I talked about upstairs by Ansel Adams. The 2 photographs on either side are by Jonathan Kalm, who is a photographer who teaches at Stanford and is very interested in the ways that photographers exist within the American landscape. He is a Black man making landscape photographs. Landscape photography traditionally has been the purview of white men. Recently, Jonathan Kalm has been photographing landscape sites that are featured in the incredibly important series, The Negro Motorist Green Book, which was published between 1936 and 1966. And it listed places throughout the United States where Black folks were welcome to eat, to rest, to get fuel, because there were so many places that they were not allowed to shop or to get a hotel room or even to get gas. One place that he did find in the 1957 version of the Green Book is Crater Lake Lodge. This photograph by Kalm of Crater Lake Lodge is so beautiful to me for so many reasons, including the fact that it does feel a bit like a tourist image because Kalm has included his own shadow self-portrait in the foreground of the image, which we see in many, many tourist photographs when people photograph away from the sun and their shadow spills out into the foreground. It is placed next to the wonderful 1958 self-portrait that Adams made in Monument Valley, Utah, as an expression and a kind of recognition of this trope, this way of being, this type of self-portraiture within the landscape that landscape photographers make. And one of the most impressive photographs in the exhibition is Jonathan Kalm's self-portrait along the California coastline. Jonathan Kalm's double vision record is a new addition to the Portland Art Museum's photography collection. And in this work, which I think is both a landscape and a self-portrait, the artist assumes the position of past and present day landscape photographers. He's under a dark cloth and he's using a large format camera. He's in the act of creating an image of the California coastline, a space that was long favored by revered masters of photography like Ansel Adams and Edward Weston. And typically, the artist's skin color would not be visible to passersby because he would be completely covered by pants, shoes, and the dark cloth. But Kalm's pointed inclusion of his unclothed body asks us to question our assumptions about who is most welcome in the world of landscape photography, who has easy access to the landscape, and who is free to move through nature with little or no resistance. The last photographs that you see in the exhibition will ask you to hold the beauty and the power of the Western landscape with the tragedy and the reality. The photographs that you see over my left shoulder are all by Ansel Adams, and they capture the beauty and the destruction and the rebirth of forest fires that occurred during his lifetime in beautiful but painful detail. The photographs that you see to my right are photographs by Laura McPhee that were taken in Idaho in 2008 that also demonstrate the destruction but the incredible rebirth of the land in Idaho after forest fires. We are living in a place that has been through so much over the past year, from the pandemic that is worldwide to the very local forest fires that came threateningly close to our own city of Portland. We hope that as you move through this exhibition, like us, you hold these two truths at the same time, that the landscape here where we live is exceptional and precious, but we're losing aspects of it, and it is up to us to figure out how to be better caretakers for it. Thank you for being with me as we take a brief overview of Ansel Adams in our time. And I hope you'll be able to see the exhibition in person here at the Portland Art Museum soon.
Awesome.
Phew. Thanks to your in-laws. Thanks for their bandwidth. The tech work, that's great. And thank you, Julissa. And thank you so much for running those videos. That can be very stressful. Whew, well, we all just went on quite a journey. This exhibition for me is so special because it does remind us who Ansel Adams is, but also underscores many of the maybe things he wanted us to know about our land and our landscape, the land, the landscape. And I think the contemporary artists in the exhibition underscore that, because a lot of what Adams was pointing to when he was photographing, we are absolutely facing today. And that's one of the reasons why I ended the exhibition with the forest fire images, because while that's difficult, certainly it's very difficult subject matter, we just experienced it so closely and painfully right here. And that may be in our future sooner rather than later again. So I think it's important to keep these concepts, these thoughts, these realities close. And photography is such a powerful medium to, I think, get us to either remember, wake up, reconsider. So thanks, everybody. I don't know if any questions have come in. Happy to take some.
Yeah, please, if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask Julia. We have the Q&A box here in Zoom, and then also feel free to make use of the chat on Facebook Live. I see somebody raised a hand. If you have a question, just enter it into the Q&A.
I can do a little pre-programming boost if you're interested in hearing from Catherine Opie, who is fantastic. We had a small portraiture, but really powerful portraiture exhibition by Catherine Opie here about 10 years ago, maybe going on 11 at this point. It was when I first arrived here, and she came and gave a talk that was wall-to-wall people, and she is absolutely fantastic. And she'll be speaking live with us, talking about the national park works and landscape 2 nights from now on Thursday night at 6 p.m. And if you go to our website, to our events calendar, you can sign up. It's free. You can sign up there. Another Zoom situation, but we'll get back to in person one of these days. But she was actually just in Rome and is just now back in LA. So it actually works well sometimes to Zoom people in rather than trying to get them from one country to another and then up here. So Catherine Opie, Thursday night.
Well, while people are sort of maybe gathering their thoughts for questions, I have a question, and I sense that this question, I know you've answered this question before, Julia, so it's going to be kind of redundant.
Not at all.
I'm always curious to hear about, like, when putting an exhibition together, at least when receiving an exhibition and then adding in those dialogues that we have that are very specific to this area or specific to some of the conversations we're thinking about, what was there anything that was very surprising about putting the exhibition together and tying in some of the more contemporary works in dialogue with Ansel Adams' work? Or interesting?
Surprising. It's one thing that I always like to leave room for is what I mentioned in the national park space, that the objects need to have a discussion with one another. And I can do a dollhouse, to scale with walls exactly placed where they are, with the exact scale pieces, and place them on the walls and think that it makes sense. And then when you get the things in, the actual pieces of paper, the actual artwork in, it doesn't necessarily work. So I would have to say that oddly, even though I've been doing this a while now, I'm always surprised at how much I don't necessarily know about a photography exhibition until I have it in the space and I can work with it. And I typically have a little bit emotional roller coaster with pretty much every exhibition I install, because I think it's going to go one way and I realize it doesn't. And then I question myself, and then I walk away for a while and just let everything ruminate like a good recipe in the kitchen, and let the work do the work. Right. So So a little bit of that happened. And then I think that Adams's photographs certainly influenced me when, for instance, I was choosing works by Jonathan Calm, because I had a number of choices, in particular from the Green Book work. I did want to pick the image of Crater Lake Lodge because that's a direct relationship to Oregon, you know, it's semi close to us. Oh, my cat's waking up, so you might hear Butter in the background. She may pop by for a visit. Butter loves to show up right at the end during Q&A. That's my girl. So I wanted the Crater Lake Lodge image, but I think I would not have thought as critically about Jonathan Calm's inclusion of his own shadow in the image had there not been the Ansel Adams shadow self-portrait from Utah. So I'm sure that partially informed my selection. And I was very, very struck by the self-portrait on the California coast by Jonathan Calm. It's a beautiful image. It's a fantastic object, but there definitely was a link to Ansel Adams because we often think of Ansel Adams using a large-scale camera. You know, an 8x10 camera, a 4x5 viewfinder camera with him under the dark cloth and, you know, camera on a tripod. So all of that language that is often packed around Ansel Adams shows up in a contemporary image made by a Black man in a place where Black photographers aren't necessarily frequenting, or certainly haven't in the past. So I think it's a nice surprise sometimes to start with an exhibition that someone else curated and see where it sends me. And because of the experiences I've had at this museum and the shows that I've had, there are things that I draw upon. And that was the same really with, I think, Wendy Redstar and Melody McDaniel too, because just in 2019 and early 2020, I had done an exhibition, Toughened to Wind and Sun, Women Photographing the Landscape. So my brain was already in a place of women moving out into the landscape, making photographs. And I felt like we needed a little more representation there, in particular with women of color. So, so some of it isn't necessarily a surprise, but I'm not expecting the connections to happen until we get closer to installation.
I think, if I may just add in really quick, one of the things I was surprised about was, well, whenever I think of Ansel Adams' work, I think of, like, you know, the sort of stoic, static shot of the pristine, you know, and I think, first off, I love that the video starts off with talking about the lights, because it automatically brings to the forefront that this work's actually always slipping away, right? Because
yes,
it's always slipping through our hands.
Always.
Yes,
fugitive.
And I love that the show ends with that in a way, in terms of, like, you know, pick like photographs of landscapes changing. I'm really taken with, and this wasn't in the video, but if for the people tuning into this, I hope you get to go see the exhibition in person, because there are these stunning cyanotypes of the ocean.
Yeah.
Ocean water, and that process and that change and that organicness and, like, the ephemerality is so breathtaking for me. And I love that that's built in. And I love Butters. So adorable.
The Megan Riepenhoff, and that was made in the waters off of Bainbridge Island where she lives. Yeah, and here she is. Everybody say hi to Butter. She's back.
Hey, Butter.
My baby girl. The Megan Riepenhoff works are so beautiful and gestural, and they are made with water. And there is detritus from you know, the bed, you know, from the shore embedded in them, which is a conservator's nightmare. The conservators from Boston were very nervous about that piece traveling because little flecks of it kind of fall off. But that is like a direct connection to the earth and to the water. And so, yes, so thank you for talking about the things that resonate with you. I love hearing about what resonate with people. I had, when I was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I did a small Ansel Adams exhibition there. And I was dealing with issues of how abstraction sneaks into some of his work. Like when we see these beautiful vistas, they're so concrete, even in two-dimensional form, and they're very specific and everything's in focus and they're gorgeous. But that's one of the reasons why I love some of the images that are details. And there are a couple photographs, and then the one image in the other side of the mountains that is also the big mural in the stairwell. There are two murals. I showed you one on this, and then there's a second one in the interior stairwell of, I'm forgetting the name of the desert space, White Sands, is it White Sands? Forgive me. And I used that photograph like 12, 13 years ago in Philadelphia. And so it still resonates with me. So it was fun for me to re-encounter some photographs that I used in Philadelphia, but then also see things I've never seen before. And I really love his images of cities. So some of his LA images, Rails and Jet Trails, is such a beautiful image. Really dynamic, but again, speaking to that encroaching of humankind and the ways that we're using land and space. Butter is, she just ate. She's really happy. These are her happy noises. So yeah, I mean, those are surprising to me in the sense that it's not, you know, the Ansel Adams that you normally see promoted in the world.
Yeah. And we have one, I see that we're getting close to time, but we have one audience question that I'd love to share. So this person asked, did or how much did Adams alter his shots in the darkroom?
Tons. Yeah, a lot. It's so interesting. And I love this about him. There were many things that were important to him in terms of the process of photography. And he really believed in making a good, solid, useful negative. But depending on the situation, that isn't always possible. He was someone who developed, quote unquote, the zone system with a collaborator, which meant being able to involve detail from the darkest part, you know, almost black part of the image, all the way to the lightest, whitest part of this black and white picture. He did some color photo too. But he's really known, of course, for black and white, and loved black and white analog processing and developing and printing. But a great example of the ways that he would manipulate in the darkroom is the Moonrise Hernandez image from 1941, which he made in New Mexico. And Ansel Adams was someone who would print from a negative that he cared about for decades. So you can get a 1941, 42, 43 print, and you can also get a print of that image from that negative, you know, that he made in the 1970s. And you can see how his interpretation of that negative changes. It goes from more tonally graded or gradiated to a much more contrasty, dynamic image in the, let's say, 30-ish years over time that he would have printed from that negative. And what I love, you know, that's the darkroom. The negative's the negative. He's doing that, all of that changing in the darkroom. What I love about Ansel is he said many things in ways that helped explain the kind of magic and beauty of photography. And just to finish up, he was trained also, well, not so much trained. He eventually had piano lessons, but I believe he learned piano on his own at first, and then started learning with actual lessons. But music was always very important to him, and then photography became very important to him. The piano was kind of always a part of his life, but he chose to move forward professionally with photography. And at some point, he is quoted as having said, "The negative is the score, and the print is the performance. And I love that because isn't that so true? Like you have the data in front of you, but then you can express the data, you can express that matrix, that negative in a different way, depending on what you're feeling and where you are and who you are. So yes, absolutely. He could manipulate negatives in the darkroom, and his vision, his thoughts around an image or how he wanted to express it changed over time.
Yeah, and that artistry, it's very beautiful. I definitely recommend everyone to go see it in person. The photographs are not the same as seeing them in a book or online. So please go check out the exhibition. It's open till August 1st.
Yes, August 1st is the last day.
Awesome. And just a reminder, Julia already mentioned this, but we do have another program coming up. We have Catherine Opie on Thursday, 6 p.m. also on Zoom. Please check out the Portland Art Museum's events calendar to register. And with that, I think we will close this lunch hour art and conversation. Thanks so much, Julia.
Thanks, Jaleesa. Butter and I say goodbye.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Yes. And
maybe on Thursday.
Yes. And thank you everybody for coming out, and we do hope to see you Thursday. So enjoy your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.